A very good afternoon, namaste, and a warm welcome to one and all who have joined this session of Beta IC. I am Sandesh Jain, convener Beta IC, and I feel privileged to welcome you all on behalf of ISA Council for the first guest lecture of our Innovation Week on Innovations in Supply Chain Management by Dr. Sajeev Josh sir. He is a professor, Operations and Supply Chain, and chairperson PGDM program at SPJN Institute of Management and Research in Mumbai. I would like to thank our respected principal, Honorable Dr. N.M. Khane sir, and our management for providing us the permission to organize the Innovation Week and conduct activities for the overall improvement of students for imbibing the culture of innovation amongst them. I would like to welcome our resource person, Dr. Sajeev Jas sir, for gracing the occasion. I would also like to welcome our principal, Dr. N.M. Khane sir, for joining the meeting. I would also like to thank President ISC, Dr. S.M. Mahajan sir, for guiding us throughout to conduct this event. I would also like to welcome our Vice President, BIT ISC, and our Innovation Coordinator, Dr. Jayesh Roykar sir, and all other office bearers of BIT ISC, student coordinators, and all my dear participants. In the year 2018, Ministry of Education, through Ministry of Education's Innovation Cell, launched the Institutions Innovation Council ISC program in collaboration with AICT for higher education institutes to systematically foster the culture of innovation in educational institutions. Primarily, the role of ISC is to engage large number of faculties, students, and staff in various innovation-related activities such as ideation, problem solving, proof of concept, design thinking, IPR, project handling, and management at institute level, so that the innovation culture get established and stabilized in higher education institutions. I am glad to inform you that BIT ISC is celebrating an Innovation Week from 26 January to 31st January 2021. For this, I would like to request Honorable Dr. N.M. Khane sir, Principal BIT Varda, to formally inaugurate the Innovation Week and address the audience.
Well, good evening, everyone. I'm glad that Dr. Sajeev Abraham George has joined us, and he will be the opening batsman for this week's batting. Thank you much, sir, for joining us. In fact, I have always a tagline: winners don't do different things; they do things differently. And innovations, in my opinion, is doing something creative, something different. So when our Institute Innovation Council was supposed to conduct many activities which will enhance the capabilities of students, which will give the students an age to think creatively, to think beyond the horizon or out of box thinking. This is what is expected from the students in innovation, from my point of view, because most of the times in innovation we mean that there should some new product should be developed or some new ideas to be launched. Of course, these are there, but there are certain smaller things which will also lead to a different product or different ideas. So, dear students, you should avail this opportunity. You should develop many creative ideas. You should also develop good products and always be creative because you have an ingenuity. You are engineering student. So I think you should take utmost benefit of the platform which has been provided to you, and people like Dr. George who will be guiding you to make this process more simpler, because as many people join us, they share their ideas. Like supply chain management is a concept which I have heard about. I didn't go through much into details because I always felt that it is not my field. But once the people like Dr. George explain this, then it becomes really interesting, I know. So thank you so much, Dr. George, for accepting our invitation, and your expertise will definitely give some dimension to the students' creativity and definitely some new horizon. So I hope that your lecture and the entire innovation week which our faculty has planned will be very, very fruitful. My best wishes are always there. Let this week be prolonged for a year. let this not be only a single week. All weeks in a year should be innovative, should be creative, and students will always be active. So my best wishes are always there. Once again, thanking Dr. George, and now I hand over to Professor Sandesh Jain for the proceedings. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. So thank you, Principal Sir, for inaugurating the Innovation Week and giving insight of what innovation means at student level. And sir, definitely we would be making this week like across the year. We would conduct as many programs as possible for imbibing the culture of innovation amongst our students. So okay, sir. So participants, today we are fortunate to have our esteemed guest of honor, Dr. Sajiv George sir, present with us, and he will be sharing his invaluable knowledge about supply chain management with our students. So I would like to request Dr. Jayesh Rohikar sir, Vice President BIT IISc Varda, to introduce our guest of honor, Dr. Sajiv George sir.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Innovation Week of Bajaj Institute of Technology, Varda. It is second activity of the Innovation Week, and it is a great pleasure for me to introduce our today's speaker, who is going to talk about the lifeline of the businesses, that is supply chain management. Our speaker, Dr. Sajiv George, is a professor, operation and supply chain in SP Jain Institute of Management and Research, Mumbai, and also a chairperson of postgraduate diploma in management program. Dr. Sajiv has PhD in Industrial Engineering and Operations from IIT Bombay and have completed his Master in Industrial Engineering and Bachelor in Mechanical Engineering from NIT Kozhikode, Kerala. His major research area includes supply chain management, production and operation management, service management, empirical research in operation management, performance measurement, and quantitative modeling. He has 17 years of teaching experience in production engineering in the University of Mumbai and is currently working in SP Jain Institute of Management and Research, Mumbai from June 2008. He has received IBM Faculty Award in 2008. He has also received Emerald Outstanding Research Paper Award in 2009. He is a member of prestigious organizations like Production and Operation Management Society (POMS) and Decision Science Institute, that is DSI. He is life member of Operation Research Society of India, that is ORSI, Society of Operation Management (SOM), and Indian Society of for Technical Education (ISTE). He was conference chair at 12th annual ISDSI conference in 2018 and program chair at POMS India chapter conference in 2016 organized by SPJIM. He has many national and international publications to his credit and published his paper in reputed journals like Journal of Global Operation and Strategic Sourcing, Emerald Emerging Market Case Studies, International Journal of Business Performance Management, and International Journal of Logistics, Economics and Globalization, etc. He has presented his papers in major research conferences across the world like Chicago, USA, IIM Trichy, IIIE Trivandrum, Orlando, USA, IIM Calcutta, Denver, USA, IIT Delhi, IIM Kozhikode, NITIE Mumbai, Taipei, Taiwan, Hawaii, USA, and many more. We are fortunate to have such a great resource person with us. This session will definitely take us through the journey of supply chain management and inspire us to innovate. Now, I would like to request Dr. Sajiv sir to address the gathering. Thank you, and over to Dr. Sajiv sir. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, let me express my sincere gratitude to Principal Professor Kane, Professor Jayesh, and Professor Sandeep for giving me this opportunity, and also to my friend Professor Ashutosh to have invited me for this program. I'm very happy to join from Mumbai for this. In fact, for last few years, I have been part of a business school, SP Jain, so not so much directly connected with engineering, but I'm very engineering is so much close to my heart, and I feel very happy to interact with engineering students. I hope this session will help you to maybe get some general understanding of supply chain management and possibly some aspects of innovation relating to supply chains. So in fact, these two words, when you talk about both supply chain management and innovation, I think these two are two buzzwords which people keep talking about, right? Supply chain management from last 30 years, something people have been talking about it, and a lot of say companies managing their supply chain rather than just being only looking at the firm. So when you talk about supply chain, I think, as everybody knows, it's about inter-organizational management, not just limited to one single firm. How do you look at your suppliers and other partners in your business, downstream and upstream? And how do you deliver value to the customer? Ultimately, for any business organization, as you all know, you deliver products and service to the customer, right? And when you deliver products and service to the customer, you are trying to add superior value for customer. And supply chain management helps to add superior value for the customer. And there are a lot of innovations in supply chain management. And maybe I'll possibly try to throw some light into some of them. Maybe what I'll do is I will spend a little time on some of the fundamental elements of supply chain management, and then possibly also discuss a little about maybe innovations relating to supply chain, and I'll be very happy to possibly answer a few questions towards the end. Right, that's what in this 1 hour I hope we would be able to do. Yeah, so let me try to share my PPT. Let me see if I can share it. Just give me a minute. I hope I'll be able to do this. Just a minute. Okay, so I don't know whether you're able to see my PPT. Are you able to see this PPT? I hope you're able to see this. Right?
It is visible, sir. It is visible.
Okay, very good. Thanks for confirming that. Yeah, so when you talk about supply chain, as I said, the main themes that comes to anybody's mind would be how do you provide this products or product service bundle to the customer. Of course, most of the companies, they have a product service bundle. How do you deliver this products and service to the customer, and how do you do that in the most efficient and effective way? I think that's what the main theme of supply chain management. And for this, as I said before, we have a number of different firms. It is not just one single business organization, right? So which means that we require the performance of a number of business organizations, both physical and also service processes owned by different business organizations. And one always talks about integrating all these various processes when you talk about supply chain. It is not just limited to integration of various functions of a business organizations. I think when I say functions, you know, marketing and finance and HR and say functions a typical business organization may be having. You need to integrate those functions. At the same time, you also need to integrate with your partners in the supply chain, right? With maybe the upstream, the suppliers. Then you may have possibly, if you're a manufacturer, you may have a distributor, you may have a wholesaler, you may have a retailer, and of course, you also have the end customer or the consumer. How do you integrate all these different processes or different firms which are handling these different processes? I think that's an important aspect in supply chain. So integration is the key, and for that, of course, when you want to integrate things, you need to also have information sharing, right? Information sharing enables firms to integrate. So you need to integrate using maybe information technology. A lot of developments in information technology that has helped, say, firms to maybe integrate not just within the functions of the business, but even beyond beyond the firms to maybe other inter-organizational kind of integration. So when you look at supply chain, the further objectives, as I said before, we talk about designing, managing, and also improving various processes. So when you look at processes, it might be, I think, to make this understand, maybe look at upstream and downstream processes, because for companies to produce something, you need to first say procure or buy certain things, raw materials and things of that kind. So you talk about sourcing of material or sourcing of certain services, and procurement, of course, the way in which you procure the raw materials, and the purchasing activities and things of that kind. So sourcing and procurement, which mostly happens in the upstream for a manufacturing organization. Then, of course, manufacturing, that definitely adds value for the customer. So that is production. When you say manufacturing, might be say focusing on the production aspect. Then you also talk about transportation, because you have a lot of movement of material that might be happening across these different stages of the supply chain. So where we have upstream and downstream. So logistics, sometimes people talk about logistics, that might include transportation, warehousing, storage of material, and movement of material from one place to another. Also talk about material flow. When we talk about material flow, you also have to optimize the inventory in the whole supply chain. How do you manage the inventory in the supply chain? That's an important part of supply chain. Then, of course, the customer service. That's an important aspect because ultimately you need to deliver products and service to the customer, and you also need to deliver the service in terms of customer interaction. So maybe from the retailer point of view, that may be very important when you look at the customer service. So that, which is again integral part of supply chain. And at the same time, there could also be some reverse flow supply chains in terms of material coming from the supplier, not only from supplier to the customer, it can also be from the customer to the suppliers, the returns and the repairs and all that, which again is an integral part of supply chain. So all these processes, how do you make it more efficient and effective, and how do you integrate them more and more? I think that's what supply chain basically is trying to achieve. And the reason behind maybe the growth of this philosophy of supply chain management, maybe starting from maybe 1990s onwards, most companies these days, they compete as supply chains, right? You don't compete as a firm these days. You have to compete as maybe a supply chain, which is an integration of different firms. So competition nowadays is between supply chains, because for successful global competition, it is important for supply chains or integrated supply chains to compete. And what are the reasons for this trend? Of course, this has been there for last 30 or 40 years, but the trend basically due to making sure that you manage the supply chain more effectively, so that there is more cost reduction. So cost reduction might be one of the objectives. Definitely you want to reduce cost. So when you have different partners doing different stages of business or value addition that are required for say producing and delivering products to the customer, there is a possibility for capturing the synergy and also to reduce cost. So the information technology is, of course, the main what you call the enabler that help say companies to practice this philosophy of supply chain management. So IT developments in IT are something that enable companies to practice supply chain management. Without information technology, I don't think we can talk about effective supply chain management anyway. At the same time, we also talk about transportation. What are the developments, new developments that happen in the area of logistics and transportation? That also would have given a lot of say further say maybe supply chain or people focusing on supply chain to say compete in business. And of course, last but not the least, it also gives a lot of flexibility, because customers are the requirements of the customers are changing a lot. Gone are the days when the customers are happy with any product that you're delivering to them. Now the customers want much more variety. So which means you need to change as per the changing needs of the customer. So supply chains help firms to be more flexible and also to customize their products and services as per the changing needs of the customer. So I think all these maybe would have been some of the drivers of the thought behind supply chain management. Of course, the old paradigm was more in terms of vertical integration. I think when you talk about vertical integration, you would have heard of possibly the Henry Ford supply chain, where the whole of value addition, all the activities that are required for production of the car, the T model, that is all owned by one single business organization. right? So the Ford T model, I think some of you would have heard of it, where Henry Ford seemed to have said that I can give you any color as long as it is black or something. So which means he did not have flexibility at all. But that was one of the greatest innovations in manufacturing. One of the greatest innovations in manufacturing, because that helped to reduce the cost of producing cars significantly. So that actually made maybe a common man, or maybe a typical, maybe a common American to own a car, which was not possible before. It was prohibitively expensive. So this was one of the greatest innovations at that time. But nowadays, of course, that is not something that is going to work, because customers are much more demanding. You need much more variety of products, so you need much more customization, much more flexibility. So then the new paradigm is focusing on activities or areas of specialization, and then focus on also trust-based relationship with other business organizations. So now it is more horizontal integration rather than vertical integration. So where you have collaboration with other partners in business, where there are other firms which can perform certain value additions so well, and you focus on the core competencies that you have. If you look at maybe an automobile manufacturer these days, automobile companies might be focusing mainly on the design, the final assembly, and also the marketing. So most of the other activities could be possibly outsourced to different partners in the supply chain. So that's the way I think mostly supply chain work these days, which is coordinating various activities which are distributed across different firms in the value chain or the supply chain. Okay, so if you look at supply chain in a linear fashion, you may have a number of different entities. You may have suppliers upstream. You may have a supplier. If you consider yourself to be a manufacturer, then you may have suppliers. You may have tier 1 supplier, tier 2 supplier, even tier 3 suppliers. At the same time, you also have downstream. You may have warehouses and various distribution centers, or maybe some people call it depots, and maybe stockists, and maybe wholesalers, stores, or final retail points, and finally the customer. So there is a flow of information, flow of material, and flow of maybe money across various stages of this supply chain. This helps us to visualize the various stages that you have, and how complex all these stages could be, and how difficult it is to integrate all these functions in supply chains. And when you talk about businesses compete based on different priorities, right? All businesses are not trying to minimize cost. That may not be the only way in which compete in business, right? So you may sometimes customers buy products maybe from companies where the quality is perceived superior. That is possible, and the customers might be ready to pay for that more. A higher price, maybe a premium, the product or the company can charge from the customer, since you are possibly delivering a superior quality product. If you look at maybe companies like maybe Sony or Honda or something, I think the first thing that comes to anybody's mind is more in terms of the quality of the product. So where the competition might be more in terms of superior quality. So more than cost, they're possibly able to deliver superior quality products to the customer. So that might be one way of competing. And at the same time, another ways of competing could be in terms of the speed. Can you deliver products faster than competition to your customers? So the speed of delivery, or the delivery speed, is a competitive priority. And sometimes you also compete based on flexibility, because you might be having more product variety, you might be having volume flexibility, you might be having flexibility in terms of new products, and all these various flexibilities in terms of flexibility of distribution, volumes, and all these kind of things. So where you have say customizing as per the changing needs of the customer. If you're able to do that more than other firms, then you possibly have a competitive advantage, and that's what you call it possibly flexibility. And the innovation, that's what we keep talking about. I think that's what gives all progress, or maybe what you call maybe the quality of life of people over the years keep increasing because of innovation. So some companies, they innovate faster, or they are innovating at a faster rate as compared to others. If you look at maybe companies such as Google or maybe Apple or something, they're known for innovation. So it could be, say, in terms of, as Professor Kane, the principal, has rightly said, something that is new and that also makes economic sense. So how do you come out with new ways of doing things, new products, new services, and also processes in terms of producing and delivering things in new ways and improved ways? And that's what innovation is basically representing. And you have maybe new products introductions, how companies introduce new products. That could be one of the measures of innovation. There are companies who are introducing new products faster than competition, which could be possibly a measure of innovation. So innovation is another way in which you might compete in business. So cost, quality, speed, flexibility, innovation. So maybe a mix of all these things you need to have, so that you have say success in business, and also maybe derive some kind of competitive advantage. Okay, I think this is something which all of us know. When we talk about innovation, it's as simple as maybe something new that adds value for customer, right? So something that you can possibly add value for customer. And when you say add value for customer, it need not be always reducing cost. The same product, if you can deliver a service or product at a lower cost, there could be some innovation there itself. Or you can have maybe a new product, or maybe an improved product, or a product that is delivered faster to the customer. All these things you can possibly consider as innovation. So where it could be adding value for customer and also making an economic sense. That is very, very important. It is not just only trying to add value. It should also make economic sense in terms of that should something that the company should be able to pursue in a long term. So it should make some economic sense. So I think some people try to differentiate between invention and innovation. I think something that possibly all of us know, invention could be more in terms of discovery, something that new thing that you have discovered. But the innovation is about how that is put to use and how that also makes some economic sense. So in that sense, all inventions may not possibly get translated into innovation. And in business, I think people are more concerned about innovation rather than invention. So many inventions are there which have failed to take off, in terms of failed to make sure that it is adding value for customer and at the same time also making an economic sense. So in that case, it may not be qualified as an innovation. So I think we keep talking about innovations, and the supply chain is something that can possibly help innovation of products and also innovation of processes across the various stages of the value chain. Okay, so I think I said this just about this just before itself. We talk about innovation in terms of product and also innovation in terms of process, because process is in terms of how do you produce a product, right? So product is the output of a business organization. Product or service or product service bundle is the output of a business organization. But it is also about how do you deliver these products and service, and that's what I mean when I say process innovation. So product innovation again could be where one can talk about radical kind of innovation, something completely new. So radical innovation, or sometimes people say breakthrough kind of innovations. So that one way of looking at things, something radical, something completely new, something that you had not seen before. In products, you can see that completely new products where it is a radical kind of innovation. But there are a lot of incremental, say, innovations happening, continuous improvement that we keep talking about. Yeah, maybe a new update or refresh of technology, or some change in the components, or change in the way they are possibly interlinked, things of that kind. There could also be a lot of incremental improvement. So companies might need to have sometimes radical improvements, radical changes, or radical innovations. At the same time, companies also keep innovating in an incremental way. So both, I think this might be two, say extremes, or maybe two ends of the innovation continuum, where we talk about radical versus incremental. I think, but that is not mutually exclusive, because when you do radical, you also keep improving the same. So you need to keep improving the products and the services that you have newly designed. And one can also talk about innovation in process. And I think operations supply chain basically talks more about process innovation, right? So I think I said about Ford assembly line, which is a great innovation, right? A great innovation, which is basically in the way cars are being produced, the process. How do you produce cars from craft production to assembly line? Ford is known as the father of assembly line, mass production, assembly line, large volume production, where we have huge economies of scale, where you can reduce costs a lot and make maybe the product affordable to a larger section of the society. So Ford assembly line, of course, was a great innovation. Of course, the Toyota production systems, people would have heard of it, Toyota production systems. We talk about just-in-time and Japanese manufacturing systems and so on, lean, all those kind of things, again, coming under process innovation, because this again is another innovation that maybe companies like Toyota and all, they again pioneered this innovation, where we talk about how to minimize the waste, right? Because in assembly lines, also you have a lot of products being produced, but maybe you are not able to sell it. If you're not able to sell it, it becomes a waste, right? If the customer might not want the car that you have produced, then it becomes a waste. Overproduction can be a waste. So how do you produce products when the customers want and in the way that the customer like? And that's what I think possibly Toyota production system tried to do. That again was one of the greatest inventions, and then further Toyota production system translated into maybe a just-in-time system, and further into lean manufacturing, lean production, lean thinking even, and possibly lean Six Sigma and so on. And one can also talk about continuous improvement. We talk about total quality management, Kaizen, and those kind of philosophies which are discussing, or which are basically dealing with continuous improvement. And Six Sigma initiatives. Six Sigma, I think a lot of projects on Six Sigma these days. Many companies, I think GE and Motorola and those companies, they first pioneered the philosophy of Six Sigma, which is more top-driven rather than bottom-up kind of approach, which is a total quality management approach. So all these continuous improvement and process re-engineering, which is again maybe one can differentiate that as radical versus incremental. So in process innovation, if you talk about radical, one can say business process re-engineering, just like what we have said before. That is the assembly line and the product and the lean, or the Toyota production system and so on. And further, how do you keep continuously improving the process? And there we talk about total quality management, Six Sigma, lean, and so on. So product versus process might be one way of looking at innovation. I think one can even go further. I think I said about incremental versus radical. I think these are two classifications, broad classifications of innovation. I think that we have already said. But maybe one can also have more classification based on this framework. This was possibly researched by, say, the authors of this paper, where they talk about whether the core concepts are reinforced or overturned versus whether the linkages between core concepts and components, whether they're changed or unchanged. So if you look at radical innovation, that possibly is the disruptive kind of innovation, where we not only change the core concepts, but also the system, how they are integrated, how the linkage between the concepts or the components of a system, when that also is being challenged or changed, then we talk about radical innovation. But one can talk about maybe, of course, incremental innovation, where both core concepts may not be changed, it's only just improved or reinforced, and at the same time the linkages also not change, it is just incremental changes in that. But there could be architectural innovation versus modular innovation. If you look at maybe a digital or maybe an analog phone to a digital phone, it could be some kind of modular, where the core concept could be overturned, but how the different components are still integrated in the whole product. If you consider the product as a system, how these different components are integrated, that wouldn't be much of a change. In that case, you may call it as a modular innovation, while architectural innovation is possibly the other aspect where you may not really change much of the core concepts, but at the same time, you may change the way the different concepts or different components of that system integrated in the whole product. And that is again another way of say innovation. So one can possibly talk about different types of integration beyond what we said about radical versus incremental innovation. Why do you innovate? This might be a big question as far as business organizations are concerned. Why? And when you talk about innovation, of course, it definitely gives some financial gains. And for business organizations, the main what you call the business performance is measured more in terms of market share and market growth. So when you pursue innovation, it helps firms to enhance its market share and also possibly enhance its growth. So that means the business performance. One can talk about business performance, how to improve business performance in terms of the broad market share, market growth, and things of that kind, which could be the reason behind a lot of product and service innovations. At the same time, innovations could be also for being more efficient. That means trying to reduce cost. How can you improve your productivity? How can you achieve more with less resources? That's what we mean when we say productivity. So it is sometimes not just for improved market share and revenue growth. It could also be sometimes for reducing your costs and maybe passing on maybe a fraction of the cost that you have saved to the customers. So that means you can even reduce a price. You reduce a cost and reduce a price, and that can also happen. And that might be one of the reasons why firms would want to innovate. And the additional reasons might include reasons such as, technical capabilities, how to build better technical capabilities. I think that might be a reason for many companies for innovating more and more. It could also be building on their possibly the previous failures, because many of the innovations happen because of a lot of failures, right? So it doesn't happen in the first attempt. Many of these things you keep failing and failing and failing, and then you come out with something that finally is able to maybe make some economic sense. Yeah, if you look at maybe even inventions such as the light bulb by Edison, I think he failed more than 100 times before finding out the right way of making a bulb. So which means failures is maybe a stage in which you might again reach the level of innovation that you might need to. So that means you may learn a lot from the failures that might help you to innovate further. And of course, it can also create different options for the customers, and also maybe having your own what do you call flexibility in terms of different products, and how do you produce them? How do you, if one product is not working in the market, how do you probably promote the other product and so on? So that kind of options again companies might want to pursue by having these innovations. Some statistics might be interesting. Research says that 32% of the company's sales many a times would be accounted for by the new products that are introduced. Yeah, for many companies, it may not be the same for all companies, but on an average, you can say new products might be accounting for a large proportion of a firm's sales. And some say further statistics, 40%, 49%, almost 50% of the sales in the new products in comparison to 25.2% or something from the rest of the products and so on. And also you can see the failures that also happen, right? Innovation, many a times you need to fail and fail and fail to succeed finally, right? So you say 1 in 7 products only finally succeed, but the ones that succeed, that pays so much handsomely to the firm, right? So even if you fail so many times, finally when you succeed, it gives you so much of benefit, and that could be one of the reasons why the new product development, NPD, that's what many people say, is an important role for most of the companies. So it can only be just a few years. In a few years, you you get the return on investment. Say in 2.5 years, you may sometimes get the return of investments and so on. So it might also be another reason why companies might pursue innovation, which is measured by maybe the new products that they introduce in the year. How many new products have you introduced in a year? That could be one of the measures of how do you maybe quantify innovation. Okay, so value creation versus process efficiency. I think this is what I said before. So creating value for customer, at the same time also reducing cost. So process efficiency in terms of how do you deliver this value to the customer in the most efficient and effective way. And this is what ultimately can provide firms with a long-term competitive advantage. So both in process efficiency and value creation, innovation helps a lot in supply chains. Okay, so when you talk about creating value, how value is created, or what value is judged by the customer. Ultimately, we always say value is the final judge of value is the customer or the consumer. And that again, when you look at customer, there are some expectations of the customer, and different customers perceive things differently. So which means you have some objective ways of looking at innovation, maybe in terms of the new products that you have developed or you are introduced into the market, or in terms of possibly the market share, market growth that you achieved using this new innovative products and things of that kind. At the same time, you also need to possibly have subjective measures too, right? Customer satisfaction, customer delight, say subjective measures of performance and innovation. So you need to have a combination of these two if you want to really judge the value and the innovation, whether it is successful or not, or not. And the expectations of different customers are different. The target segment of customers that your firm is basically looking at, you need to understand the expectations, and then the innovation should also be targeted to those segment of the market or segment of the customer. And when you talk about different ways of creating value, right? Number of different ways in which firms can create value for customer. It could sometimes be just transforming. So manufacturing is basically transforming raw material into finished product. Of course, there's a value addition there. The value of the car is much more than the value of the raw materials. Let's say the steel and the rubber and the plastic and all those things that are used, the value of the car is much more than the combined value of all those things. So that means the conversion or transformation from raw material to finished product. So that could be one way of adding value. Or it could be sometimes moving material from one place to another, transportation, because there's a place value for customer, right? It has to deliver to the customer. So which means if you move material from one place to another, or for a service process, it could be simply you moving from one place to another. There's a value for that. You're ready to pay to maybe travel from Wardha to Mumbai. So there is a value there in moving people or in moving material. So that could be another way of adding value. And there again, you have a lot of innovations possible. So in terms of possibly the time, storage might be important. How long you store, and how do you store and also distribute things. So how do you do this more efficiently? So that could also be another way of adding value. Transportation, logistics, also possibly storage, warehousing, things of that kind, which can also create value. Sometimes it could be by solving problems to the customer. Most of the consulting firms are basically doing nothing but solving problems to the customer. So you might be an R&D firm, you might be a consulting firm, or it could just be a repair shop, or maybe even a hospital where you're trying to solve the problems of the customer, which could involve diagnosis of the problem sometimes, right? So in this case, there is again a possibility to add value for a customer in terms of designing something new or diagnosing the problems that the customers face. So consulting and repair, and possibly even hospitals and say the service that are delivered to the customer in many of the settings would be coming under solving a problem. And sometimes value could be added by being a mediator between the supplier and the customer. So there could be sometimes banks or maybe insurance firms or retailers or maybe a stock exchange and various other kinds of business firms where we talk about information. How do you process the information supplied by the customer and deliver value to the customer? And it could be just transactions or bringing parties together. And sometimes it could be just pooling the risk that is maybe faced by the customer, like insurance might be a best example for that, where we have customer is ready to share or pool the risk with other customers who are having similar kind of risk. And that could be another way of adding value. So number of different ways of adding value for customer, and there could be innovations in all these various things. So whether it is transforming, solving, mediating, all these kind of things, right? And also about various aspects of product in terms of quality. I think we said about this already. The performance of the product, then features that you have in a product, superior features in the product. They're all measures of quality. Then reliability, we keep talking about mean time between failures. So reliability, how do you measure it? Are your products more reliable as compared to maybe your competition? And conformance to specifications, that's again another measure of quality. How your products and services are conforming to the specifications and standards, and maybe ISO and various other standards, the standards that you have set, the internal standards, the targets or the benchmarks, so that kind of things. Or in terms of the durability of the product, what is active life of your product? How long is active life of the product? Durability and the dependability of the product. Sometimes the support that you get for the product from the service provider, in terms of the appeal, the aesthetics, and of course the perception of quality itself, which could possibly be different for different customers. And the speed of timeliness in terms of the reliability, the lead time, how fast are you delivering products to the customer, the speed of delivery, and availability, whether your products are available, the customer wants the product, whether products are available for delivery or not. Otherwise, sometimes the customer might go elsewhere. So availability of product, which becomes again important aspect of the value proposition. And of course, all of us know cost in terms of the price and the total operating cost and the total cost of ownership and all those kind of things, which again might be important, right? And as I said, we keep talking about say strategy, right? Ultimately, you need to have some strategy. All business organizations need to have some strategic priorities, competitive priorities. You can't be the best in everything, right? As human beings also, we can't be, right? We all have some strengths and also we have some weaknesses, right? So we can't always try to be the best in everything. What you need to do is certain things possibly you need to differentiate. And that's what I think in businesses, again, companies might want to compete based on differentiation that the company can provide as compared to the competition. Possibly in terms of delivery, in terms of the speed, in terms of the quality, in terms of possibly cost, various different aspects. So, of course, you might need some level of performance in all these various aspects of performance, whether it is cost, whether it is speed, whether it is flexibility, whether it is innovation. All these various things, you need a certain level of performance that a customer expects for customer to even consider doing business with you. And that is what you call order qualifier. You need to qualify for the order. The customer at least consider doing business with you. And for that, you need certain level of performance as far as cost is concerned, the speed is concerned, flexibility is concerned, or even quality, or even innovation is concerned. Right? So that is one aspect. At the same time, that may not help you to win the order. You may qualify for the order, but you may not win the order. So I think it's important for companies to also be excellent in a couple of things, so that customer might, those customers who are looking for that particular attribute in the product or service might possibly want to buy or do business with that particular firm. So that means you need to excel at certain things. You may excel at maybe speed. You might excel at innovation. If you look at maybe companies like Google and Apple and all those companies, maybe the innovation might be the #1 competitive priority for them. The order winner. Customer is ready to pay a premium for that. If you look at maybe a iPhone, what is the cost of an iPhone? It might be maybe $100 or even less than that, and they sell it for more than $1,000 sometimes. The premium that a customer is paying is so huge because you come out with new products, innovative products, and customer is ready to pay much more for those kind of say innovative products. So which means you are also having some order winners that helps you to possibly win the order, and that can sometimes be simply the cost. Other things being all same, if you have possibly a lower price as compared to maybe the competition, customer might buy that. So you could be sometimes having what you call the cost leadership. The cost leadership should be one way of maybe competing in business, but there are various other ways. You might be customizing products better as compared to others. So the innovation can help you to improve quality, improve cost, improve speed, and improve various aspects of say business. And order qualifiers and order winners is something that maybe we all need to think about, so that there is some minimum level of performance in all of this. At the same time, certain things you can do possibly better than others, so that there is a segment of customers who might be interested in that value proposition, and you might be able to grow your business in that particular segment of customers. Right? So yes, and if you look at sources of innovation, let me come to possibly the concluding part of my my talk, where I will possibly end with some of the sources of innovation. Of course, innovation happens from people, right? People are the source of innovation, there is no doubt about it. But of course, it need not always happen within the company, right? So there could also be a lot of external source of innovation. The user also can be a source of innovation. These days, we keep talking about lead user research, lead user innovation, things of that kind. So where the lead user might be providing a lot of inputs to the company in terms of how to improve the products or service, and improving the different features and the innovation that possibly can happen. The first say few users who may call it as lead users. A lot of ideas for innovation can happen from lead users. Innovation. So innovation is a user innovation when the developer, which could be a firm or individual, expects to benefit by using it. Right. That is what you call user innovation. But there is also the manufacturer can also be innovating things where there's a benefit by manufacturing and also by selling it. In that case, you may call it as innovation by a manufacturer. And lead user is a very, very important concept used by a lot of companies these days, where you can integrate the ideas by the users and the customers and consumers, so that it need not be confined to possibly ideas within the firm. Of course, a lot of ideas come within the firm too, but one can also integrate with your suppliers and your downstream partners, and also possibly the customers, and that can help you to say enhance the speed at which you innovate. Right? And IT, there's no doubt about this. I think many of this information technology, the developments in information technology have helped companies to say innovate faster. And some of the tools, all of us know about analytics and big data, which has helped a lot of innovations in products and also in process. IoT, Internet of Things, that is something which many companies, many firms are using to collect real-time data, also to use that along with big data and analytics to improve performance. Blockchain, that has got a lot of applications in the supply chain in terms of the information flow and how do you manage different say transactions in the supply chain more secured way. So blockchain is a concept or a technology that has found a lot of new applications. And of course, all of us know about artificial intelligence and machine learning, which are also changing a lot of things in the supply chain, both for products as well as for process. And then of course the additive manufacturing, the 3D printing and such kind of things also say disrupting many supply chains in a big way. So a lot of developments in IT, information technology, again driving say innovations in supply chain. I think as engineers, I'm sure that many of you will be dealing with some of these technologies. You might be working on some of these things, and I'm sure that you might be able to contribute to you or to your businesses or the business companies that you're going to join in, and also possibly some of you might also want to start something of your own, right? A lot of startup opportunities are there which might be taking advantage of some of these technologies and so on. And all these can ultimately help to improve, say, performance in the supply chain, because supply chain captures the synergy of all these various entities, right from the supplier to the end customer. So these ideas can help firms to innovate, firms and also supply chains to innovate for superior performance. So with this, let me conclude my talk. I'll be happy to possibly answer your queries if you have queries. I'll be happy to do that. Thank you so much.
So thank you, sir. It was a fantastic talk, and you covered most of the aspects. Speaker, most of the aspects related to what are products, what are the various attributes. So, sir, there are some questions that we are having.
Sure.
We would be
Sure.
taking them one by one in the order that
Sure.
they have published or they
Sure.
have asked. The first question that was asked is this. Sir, I have a question. What are the future industry
impact of Industry 4.0 technologies
on reverse logistics, especially COVID recovery time?
Okay, good. I think that's a very good question, Abhishek. Thanks for asking that question. Yeah, so reverse logistics, as you all know, is about that means movement of material from downstream to upstream, right? That means basically the repairs and the returns and all those kind of things. Otherwise, of course, most of the predominant flow in the supply chain happen from upstream to downstream, from supplier or manufacturer to the customer. So when you talk about say reverse logistics, I think it is talking about more what do you call say cyclical kind of a supply chain. So as a cycle, because ultimately for any supply chain, it has to complete a whole cycle finally, right? So where the material can sometimes come back from the customer to how do you integrate that with the supply chain? I think closed loop supply chain, that's what people talk about these days, about reverse logistics and this. And when you ask questions about say Industry 4.0, I think that's again something which possibly could be different to different people. When you say forward, I think all the technologies that I have shown in the last slide, all of them possibly can come under that. At the same time, it can also look at some of the process, say innovation, things such as Lean Six Sigma, various other innovations in process technologies that can also come under say Industry 4.0. So Industry 4.0 is a combination of both product as well as process innovations. And if you look at the third part of your question about post-COVID, definitely there are a lot of changes, disruption happening for global supply chains in this because this has again tested the resilience of supply chain, right? How flexible or resilient the supply chains are. Because if you have one single source, probably if there's a disruption, a lot of supply chains would have got disrupted because of this. The customer demand is changing one side, and at the same time, you also have supply disruptions. And this again has say resulted, or this is needed companies to develop more resilience and flexibility. I think that's the way I would like to answer this question in a very, very broad way. I don't want to go into the details of that. So we need to develop resilience. We need to at the same time use maybe Industry 4.0 technologies, at the same time both process and product technologies. I think that's the way I would like to answer this question, Abhishek.
Okay, sir. The next question that we are thing is this. Sir, can you please explain with example the types of innovation like architecture innovation and radical innovation?
Good. That's a very good question. In fact, that's what people sometimes interchangeably use these days, and again, interchangeably use this term sometimes. But radical versus, say, incremental is something that all of us know, right? How to differentiate between radical. Let's say if you look at maybe cooling a room. So maybe if you look at maybe a fan could be a kind of a product where which can help you to make the room a little more comfortable. So if you look at maybe an air conditioner, it could be a radical way of looking at it. So that way it could be radical. So in that sense, it could be radical versus if you try to improve your fan with better features and the components you keep improving, and also in terms of how they are integrated, if you keep doing that, that will be just what incremental. But if you come out with something completely new, disruptive ideas, right? That is what radical about. Maybe a lot of radical innovations. Maybe smartphones might be a radical innovation. But if you look at maybe iPhone, is it a radical innovation? That might be a question. It might be a radical innovation as far as how do you integrate various things? Because if you look at maybe iPhone, the various components, the technologies that iPhone has used, many of those things were available much before iPhone came in, right? Still, you consider that to be a radical innovation because maybe the way it was integrated was very, very different, and the user experience changed a lot. In that case, that was still considered a radical innovation, though touchscreen and various other technologies that iPhone used was still very much in place before they came out with that. So that is based on how do we look at the degrees of this innovation. So when you say architectural, the more important thing there is the way in which you are integrating different components of the product. If you look at a product as a system, how the different components are integrated. If you make a very, very big change there in terms of how do you integrate different things, then possibly you may talk about radical and what do you call architectural innovation. And radical innovation, of course, is something that is completely new. And this again, there is no what you call watertight way of defining these things. It depends on people. Sometimes people use these things interchangeably. But I think difference between incremental and radical is something that all can possibly easily find out. But I think when we say architectural, it might be more in terms of the system configuration. And when we talk about modular, it might be more in terms of the concept itself. This is the way I would like to differentiate between architectural, modular, say in radical versus in incremental innovation. Thanks, Divya, for asking this question. It's a very, very good question. I think that requires a lot of further explanation to answer it.
Yes, sir. So the next question is, sir, how to know about the market value of the product that I am building, and do it really have the what we can say created the monetary value? He's asking it because he said, as you explained, only one of 7 products are helpful to the company. So can you please?
Good. That's again a interesting question. Market value. When you say market value, that comes from the customer, right? Finally, it has to come from the customer. Customer has to pay for the product or the service you're delivering. So how that happens, of course, as I said, that depends on how this product or service is kind of adding value for them. If it is adding value for the customer might be ready to pay for it. And as I said, adding value can happen in a number of different ways. It could be in terms of you would have developed a great product, but you wouldn't have found out possibly the right customer segment for it. That is possible. Then only you are able to deliver it to the customer. If you're delivering, if you have developed a product but you have not found out the right segment of customers for use of this product, you may not be able to create that monetary value that you are talking about. So monetary value comes out from a number of different things, because in that case you need to think about all those various functions of business. You need to think about the market. So the marketing functions will have to come into picture in terms of how do you identify that segment of customers, how do you target them, how to position your product. All those things are very, very important, right? And also in terms of the features, what the customers expect, how do you provide those features? And this again is not a one-step thing. You need to possibly keep trying out different things and then find out what is the right the proposition, the value proposition that you can provide to the customer, which is making some economic sense finally. So this is a kind of a question which is more a marketing kind of a question. How do you market your product in the most possible way? So that can help create value for the monetary value for this thing. And that's why many great innovations also fail, because they fail to find out the proper market for it. Thanks for asking this question.
Thank you, sir.
Again, this
The
needs
next
further treatment.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the next question is this. Sir, you said that our product should have minimum attributes. So what things we should look while building our product, and how to know that we have the attributes for qualifying and winning? You just said about order qualification and order winners. So it might be the question
Right.
about.
True. That's a very good question. Again, see, there are tools for probably finding out this more objectively, because see, different attributes customers perceive it differently. The same attribute that you are possibly having in the service or product, different customers. Rahul might like something while somebody else might not like it. The same attribute, right? So which basically means the attributes are perceived differently, and the importance that the customer assigns to these attributes could be different. So that means what you possibly would need to do is the segment of market that you are trying to target. You may want to find out what that segment of customers are looking for, and then possibly provide some of them. See, some of them might be what people say, maybe just qualifiers itself. Yeah, because anyway, you have no option other than to have them, right? Because if you don't have those options or those attributes in your product, customer might not even look at it. Customer might not even want to see further, right? You don't even being considered by the customer at all for the purchase. So then further, how do you possibly have some of the attributes with also making sure that you don't increase your cost beyond a point? So that you may have to find out from surveys, different ways in which you communicate with the customer, and then see what are those attributes that the customer, the delighters, sometimes say delighters, or say exciters and things of that kind, which can excite customers, right? And this also keeps changing. Something that today is an order or maybe an exciter, tomorrow can become just an order qualifier, right? So this again changes a lot based on the time, based on the market, and based on the customer segment, and a lot of other things. Again, a very good question. I'm very happy that you're asking a lot of relevant questions. Only thing is, I don't have so much time to go into the details of some of those things.
Okay. So there are some questions
Yes.
related to COVID-19.
Okay.
So one of the questions is this. So how does the routine operations of supply chain are changed due to lockdown from offline to online, and how does it affect this industry?
True. I think this has really affected a lot of companies in a big way. I think many companies even say close down and completely their businesses. They need to probably reconfigure the whole business itself. In fact, there are examples of companies who have completely changed their product line from whatever they used to produce to totally different products and things of that kind. So that's what ultimately the point that I'm trying to say is, those who have been more flexible, they have found out ways to deal with it. But those who have been rigid, those who couldn't change with respect to time, of course, they would have possibly failed. So that is something which is very, very important for a company in terms of the resilience. So this has tested the resilience of a lot of companies, because then the many companies, the idea is survival there, right? During this COVID time, it became just a question of surviving. How do you survive this period, and then not talking about further things in terms of further making profits and maybe introducing new things and so on. I think they all would have taken a backseat. I think many of them possibly try to be in that survival mode, And the companies which had possibly better resilience, I think they were more successful, and many companies were not able to take it due to a number of different reasons. And this has helped in, again, globalization also. I mean, the dynamics between different companies changed. The globalization also took a major hit here. The supplies got disrupted, a lot of things, and I think people are looking at supply chains in a major way in terms of how do you redesign the whole supply chain, making sure that you have more resilience and more flexibility. That's possibly a very, very broad answer to this question.
Thank you, sir. So the next question is like, so this is the question. So the question is that how to minimize the effects of COVID-19 spread on the supply chain management, comparing locally and globally.
True. I think there is less globalization happening, right, because of COVID and because of maybe the geopolitical situations and things like that. These type of global supply chains, I think it would have taken a hit, but it's just maybe a temporary phenomena. I think companies would definitely need to get out of this, because if you want to add value, you need to also look at how can you leverage the geographies, the advantages that you get from different geographies, and so on. I think this kind of things have happened for different companies even before, right? Even if you look at companies like Toyota, they will face problems. Earlier days, when maybe a earthquake or something that had happened, they had a whole disruption, because companies like Toyota, they used to have sole sourcing or what you call single suppliers and things like that kind, and they changed accordingly the risk. How do you manage the risk in the supply chain? I think COVID, of course, has possibly added one more risk into the whole gamut of risk that people talk about in supply chain. So one more risk that possibly due to the pandemic. So a lot of other risks. So supply side risk, customer side, demand side risk, and various risks that you need to mitigate. How do you mitigate these various risks? And there is no one right answer for that. Different companies, they have different ways in which you might want to mitigate this risk. What is right for one company might not be right for another company. So there is no one single solution for this. But again, I would like to say you need to have flexibility and resilience in the supply chain. Those who had designed that, or those who had in the supply chain more before, possibly they were more successful. Those who did not have it, they would have had faced more challenges while they were managing their processes during this pandemic.
So the next question is like, so the supply chain management or the supply risk chain management, is there a difference, and how supply chain risk management will help cybersecurity?
Oh, that's again an interesting question. Supply chain management, of course, is a very, very broad term that we normally use, which of course includes anything relating to supply chain, including supply chain risk management. So supply chain risk management is definitely one of the elements of overall supply chain management. So that may be a very short answer to your question. And of course, there are different risks, right? Different risks that I just said. So many different types of risks that supply chains will need to possibly think about mitigating. So the cyber security risk is one among them. So I think that is something that a lot of companies these days are investing a lot. How to say mitigate this risk of cyber security. So that I think because it's again information flow. Because when you talk about information flow, I think sharing of information is what you call the essence of supply chain management, right? You can't have this what you call arm's length kind of relationship with different partners in the supply chain. You need to have that cooperative, trust-based kind of relationship. And when you need to have trust-based kind of relationship, you also share a lot of information. And when you share a lot of information, this kind of risk can definitely be very, very dominant. And you need to have various technologies to manage this. You need to have both management ways of looking at things and also technological ways of looking at things. And I think there are various ways in which companies look at the risk in terms of cyber security, and that is becoming more and more prominent. And there are a lot of say maybe the issues of this kind. Sometimes you are not ready for this always, because there could always be something new that might happen, and you find it difficult to get into these kind of things, totally addressing them. But there are different ways you might also need to address the risk of cyber security, both in terms of technology, as well as also in terms of the way you manage your relationship in the whole supply chain. I think that's the way I would like to answer this question, Devika.
So the last question from my side, sir.
Sure,
I'm
please.
teaching a course on. I'm
Please,
teaching a
that will
course
be
on
very nice.
blockchain,
Okay.
and I would like to know from you that how blockchain is going to affect the supply chain industry, and what thing we should be looking out for these things. Or as a student, or as a student of a computer engineering, what you would tell our students to look out for supply chain management and the innovation using blockchain in that.
Yeah, I think I feel a lot of, see, in fact, the cyber security thing also, that whatever Devika has asked, I think that itself blockchain can help a lot. It is considered to be much more secure. The transactions, yeah, you are not able to change anything, because everything has to be validated by all the different parts of that chain. That's why it is called chain, blockchain. And I think the main say a lot of innovation these days happening in supply chain in this front, especially in transactions, the financial part of supply chain, the financial security, and the financial processes in the supply chain. There is a lot of applications of blockchain that is making it much more foolproof. So cyber security and various other aspects. So I think it is becoming, and I think this applications are growing. There are a lot of new applications of blockchain. I'm not an expert in blockchain, but I have say exposure to a lot of blockchain projects that have happened by different companies, and they all have possibly looking forward, because more than maybe even say other technologies like 3D printing and all that, I think people used to think that that would be a game changer, but I think the way in which it is impacting supply chain is not as much as what people used to think. But the blockchain is impacting supply chain very big way, and that I think technology is being implemented in different levels by companies, and I think again in a nascent stage, but the scope of this seem to be very high, and that's what I can understand from whatever preliminary kind of interactions that I have with people who are say implementing or working on this kind of technology. That's the only thing I can say as of now. I don't think I can go into the details of that, because I'm not a person who has worked in the technology of blockchain so much, but how it helps in different supply chain process, possibly I can give some insights into that.
Okay, thank you, sir. Now we shall proceed towards the vote of thanks.
Oh,
Thank you.
thanks. I think yeah. I think yes, it's 5:40 or something. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. It
Thanks.
was a nice session.
Thanks a lot. Thank you so much.
Yes. So we shall be now proceeding toward vote of thanks. So respected dignitaries, Dr. George sir, Head of the institutions, Dr. Narendra Kane sir, President IISc, S.M. Mahajan sir, Vice President Dr. Jayesh Ruikar sir, all other office bearers, and my dear students. So let's, just like another formal meeting, this session is also approaching its end. We are all very much excited and motivated to hear the words of wisdom which were shared by Josh sir. These points shared will surely prove us to be the milestone for our future work. It's the beginning of innovation and learning. And now, with the permission of chair, I am here to propose the vote of thanks. I would like to thank Dr. Sajju Josh sir, who, despite of his very busy schedule, took his time to share his words of wisdom, share his thoughts with our students regarding competitive priorities in supply chain, what is innovation. He explained difference between invention and innovation, process and innovation with example of Ford assembly lines. He also explained the philosophies of lean thinking, Six Sigma, and also touch upon the points of what are the types of innovation, what is radical innovation, architectural innovation, and why do firms pursue innovation, and what is the role of new product development. And the last point was related to who are order winners and who are orders qualifiers. So I would I'd like to thank sir for giving out so much information about the products and its attribute that we should be looking out. Then I would also like to thank our management to give us the permission and motivation to conduct these activities under IIC. I would also like to thank our principal sir, without whom this complete endeavor was impossible to manage, whose continuous guidance and suggestions helps us, and they were like a beacon of hope for us. So thank you, principal sir. I would also like to thank Dr. S.M. Mahajan sir, President IIC, Rohikar sir, Vice President IIC, Ashutosh Doubly sir, without whom this event would not have been even organized, and all other office bearers, coordinators, and members of IIC. Lastly, but not the least, I'd also like to thank all the students who have joined through YouTube, asked questions during the sessions, and who definitely would have got definitely a lot from the session. So with this, I officially declare that this session of IIC is formally over. So thank you all for your support. Thank you, Josh sir.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Yes, sir.